Alright, as promised, here's the second half of the Absolute Beginner Blender Blockout tutorial. And a blockout number is just a little gray box. It's a very simple model that's just helping you kind of figure out your volumes, your perspectives, like where you want things to be. So you can keep on going on and model this all the way to a final beautiful 3D rendered view right here inside of Blender or whatever 3D modeling tool you're using. But for absolute beginners, there's a lot to learn. You got to learn about textures and materials and UV mapping and lighting and all kinds of stuff in there to get more exciting renders if you want it to be 100% inside of Blender. But you don't. You can use your digital painting tools like Photoshop or Procreate or whatever it is that you're using to take a render out like this and then paint over it. So maybe this wants to become an Egyptian temple and you're going to put hieroglyphics all over this, or maybe it's a space station and it's going to be a lot of like displays and blinking lights or whatever. That's up to you to do when you drop this into your paint program, and then just use this as a guide underneath that you draw on top of. That's the goal that we're trying to get with this. So I'm not getting into anything to do with materials, not getting in anything that's like fancier than just getting a picture like this out of your computer and into your paint program. So I promised I'd talk about these stairs and I'd talk about duplicate arrays and how to get some like really clean, clear rendering output so that you're not dealing with a bunch of lighting issues. You can just say like, I just want to see the lines, I just want to see the shapes. How can I do that? And I'm just going to move the 3D cursor. We haven't actually talked about that, but the 3D cursor right now is at the world origin where it is by default. The 3D cursor is something that you don't use at all until you do, and then it becomes really important. It's just like a cursor in a Word document, and you realize you want to go back in and add another word earlier in the sentence. Well, you click and move the cursor, and then where the cursor is are where the letters appear when you start typing again. The 3D cursor in Blender is exactly the same thing. Right now it's kind of, this is where things are going to appear. I'm going to add some new columns and stuff. So I'm going to just hold the shift key down and right click over here. You can also use this little cursor over here. I'm not quite sure where that put me in 3D space. Oh, actually that's not great. It's kind of low. I'm going to put it up over here. That's a little bit better. Well, now it's a little high, but that's okay. But now it's like out of the middle of our scene here, and I can add some stuff and play around with it over here. Maybe one more time. I'll put it over here. So I'm going to Shift A to add a mesh, and I'm going to add a cube. It's right there, so mesh and cube, and there it is. So we have another little default cube that's popped into our scene. Let me see how bad I am. Oh, that's not too bad. I'll push it up a little bit. Okay, so here's our default cube. One of the things that we can do is to create an array with this. I'm going to actually, I've got an idea that maybe I want these columns to be on a 45-degree angle. So we know how to do that. We can do R and Z and then 45. We could type those things over here, or we could also come over here to the side panel. This is the N panel. If you don't have that open, hit your N key, N for nifty tools that are hidden over here on the side panel. Pop that open, and you can see that, well, one of the things that we have here is rotation, and if we want the rotation to be 45 degrees, we can just put it right there. Remember that. We're going to come back to this because we did this in object mode. We rotated at 45 degrees, and I'm intentionally not doing a step here that I want to show you how that will result when you start adding things like modifiers. So I'm going to grab this cube, and I'm going to say, like, let's just make an array of these cubes that will turn into columns or maybe steps or whatever. So in order to add a modifier, you need to come to this little blue wrench down over here. Find the little blue wrench or the blue spanner, and then click on that. And then if you're using version 4 or later, when you click on this little add modifier menu, you will get these little sub panels, these little sub menus. If you're in a Blender 3 something or another, this is all going to be one giant long list, which I kind of miss. It was kind of nice to not have to worry about like which one of these menus to go into. However, most of what you're going to probably play around with is going to be in the generate menu, at least as a beginner. And right here at the top, alphabetically, is array. So if I click on array, we're going to notice, well, two things have happened. All right, so first of all, it's like, all right, well, it's definitely put it in one direction, but I wanted it to be diagonal over here. Why is it doing that? I have two now. Let me go ahead and add three. The reason why these are all like right up against each other is I'm using the relative offset with the X factor set to 1. So if I were to type in 2 in here or just scrub that up, it's going to be the same as, there's going to be a 2 meter column and 2 meters of gap and 2 meter cube and 2 meters of gap or so, or whatever this is. So you can like trombone this back and forth just by scrubbing, clicking and dragging in this field. You can type in an exact number. If you want like really small changes, you can click on these little arrows over here. Those are all different ways that you can adjust that. But how do I get this diagonal array, instead of having it going off in a diagonal direction parallel to each other, how do I get the corners? Well, remember when we rotated that, we changed the cube's like rotation without updating it. So what we need to do for that, it's just kind of the thing you just need to remember, is Control A, and you can then apply, Control A will apply all transformations. So all we really need to do is apply the rotation right now, but you can just do all transforms or rotation and scale. Any one of these things that have rotation in it will work. So I'll just say all transforms, and then, oh, sure enough, by doing that, it's now said that, oh, this cube in its natural state is rotated 45 degrees. It's not a cube that's on the 90s that's been rotated 45. We're now telling it like this is what the cube now looks like. Is that hopefully that makes sense. So that Control A, apply, something is not working the way you think it would be. It may be that you just need to apply transforms. But this is going in the wrong direction. I want them to go in this direction. It is going on the x-axis. Remember, the x-axis is the red axes over here. So if I want to go in this direction, I'm going to use the y. So what I want to do is come over here to this factor x and put in a 0 in there, and then all of them are going to disappear. And then on the y here, actually they're not disappear, there's 4 of them all stacked up together here in the same spot. But in the y, if I do that exact same thing and I type in 2, well, now I've got the columns going in that direction. However, you can go back to 1 here so you can see all of them. You can do 2 of these at the same time. This is a great way to make stairs. So I can come over here and maybe say 1 in that direction. So I can go like, okay, it's going over 1 and up 1. So you're going to make this kind of like pyramidal thing going on. So you can have in fact, you can have all 3 of them. We could have it going diagonally in another direction. You can make spirals and helixes and all kinds of things like that. You don't have to use relative though. You can deselect this and come down over here to constant offset, pop that open, and then you can type in a specific distance. So it doesn't have to be relative to the size of the cube. You can just say like, hey, every 8 meters, give me a cube. Just because I want them 8 meters. I don't care how big the column is. Relative uses the size of the object as the measuring stick. Move this, 1 full cube over. This one is saying move 8 meters over. That's the difference between those two. You can also use an object offset as well. But that's good for what we need. Oh, but I do want to go back. I'm going to go back to relative, and I'm going to take out the z over here, and then I'm going to take out the x. There we go. I want them to be in the y direction. And I'm still using that one. There we go. Okay, so now I've got my little columns going this way. Maybe I'll make them a little bit wider on this. Maybe I'll go back to the 2, maybe 1.5. We'll do that. 1.5. No, great. Now I've got my little set of columns. Maybe I'll give myself a couple more. What I'm going to do is hit the tab key to edit this, and note that when you're using things like arrays, you're actually making a little bunch of clones. So I can jump into the face mode over here and select this top face, and I'm going to just pull this arrow up, and oh, look, I've got columns, and they all change at the same time. So I could come in here and say, like, well, I'm going to add a ring, Control R to add a ring loop. I'm going to click right there in the middle, click again to tell that I'm happy. I'm going to hit the S key, and I'm going to scale these in. So I've got a little tapered column. Again, this is, I said no modeling was going to be required for these videos, but I'm just showing you doing a little bit of modeling to show you how changing one of the original mesh here is going to pass that down to all of the copies, and that can be really useful. However, maybe you want to change one of these. You want to apply this. So I'm going to get the tab key to get out of edit mode because you can't apply most modifiers in edit mode. I'm going to come over here and say, like, I'm happy with my 6 columns and the spacing of them, but I want to start changing these columns uniquely. I can't do that well in an array. So I can come to this little down caret right over here, and I can say apply, or I can just Control A while I'm hovering over this. So I could do the same. I'll just do that. Control A, and I've applied that. And you can see applied modifier. Great. Now look what happens if I tab and go into the shape, and if I grab one of these edges, and I'll just pull out one edge that direction, and maybe I'll pull another one going this direction. This is kind of a cool shape going on here. So it looks like a dam or something, or a wind turbine, or I don't know, whatever. That's kind of cool thing. But you can see that by applying the modifier, it's now turned this into unique mesh. So it's still one object. You can break them out if you want them to be separate objects, but now you can edit each one of your array objects separately. So you get it both ways. You can have it, you can cake and eat it too. So I'm going to hit tab on that, and maybe I'll just pull this over. Oh, my origin point's like way out of whack over here. So remember, we can fix that by right-clicking and saying set origin to geometry, just like we did in the first video, and then it's going to put it right in the center of your scene. You can move this origin point around, but that's topic for a more advanced video. So we'll just leave it at there. Maybe I'll push these columns back into my scene and kind of see what I think. Yeah, all right, that looks great. Now, let's talk about a staircase. Let's go ahead and grab another default cube here, or basic cube. I'm going to Shift-A to add a cube, mesh, and I'm going to go up to the top over here. Come on, you, and add in a cube in there. So I'm going to just zoom into that cube. Remember, the one thing that's a good tip to know is if you use the question mark key, question mark / key, that just hides everything else in the scene and zooms you right into whatever you have selected. That's kind of a nice thing to do. If you want to undo that, hit the question mark again. You can just kind of show and hide all you want. So I'm just going to hide everything else just to make it easy to move around. I'm going to turn this cube into a staircase using the Bevel modifier. Now, they added this a while ago. It's been a couple of years, but if you're using a really early version of Blender for some reason, maybe it's time to update. They threw this in 3.2 or something like that. I can't remember what. I'm going to hit the Tab key to enter edit mode again, and I'm going to stay in edge mode. Remember, you can use 1, 2, and 3 on your keyboards. Question mark, @ hashtag. 1 exclamation point gives you the vertex mode. 2 @ gives you the edge mode, which is what we want to be in, and 3 gives us face mode. So I'm going to hit the 2 key again, and I'm going to grab just this one face. So you can see it gets that little highlight on just that one edge. And we're going to bevel that edge. We're going to use the Control B bevel command there, and I'm just going to move my mouse down. So I'm actually just adding a chamfer right now. It's not really a bevel because it only has one face. We're just making this sort of like diagonal face. I'm just going to drag it down to where it's like not quite to the bottom, like looks something like that, and I'll pop that open, and then you'll see this bevel menu will appear. Remember, it may be closed, and you may be thinking like, what the hell do I do now? Where it's so hidden down here for beginners. This can really frustrate beginners. They're saying like, where was that menu again? And for some reason, it's closed down here in the corner, way out of the way. So we're going to go ahead and change the number of segments, but I'll do that afterwards. I can change it right now because I know what it needs to be, but I want to show you this next step first. Come down to find the custom button down over here. We're going to click on the custom button, and you'll see in the presets over here, I already have mine set to the steps here. You have default, a bunch of other ones, and at the very bottom there is steps. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that steps. Nothing changed over here. Well, the reason why is that there's not enough faces to do this. We're telling it we need all of these faces. The answer, by the way, is 16. If you just type in 16 faces, that gives you all the edges, no extra, that you need to get the full range. I think it's 9 steps. Again, you can go in and edit this and make it more, make it smaller, whatever. You can totally do that. By default, it's really easy to add a little row of 9 steps. And if you want more steps, well, you can just like make a duplicate array and just make it as tall as you want. Except I'm happy with this. I like the bevel. I like the way that this looks, except that if you look at it, it's like kind of very, very steep. Usually we don't get steps that rise and run the same amount like that. So we can change that by hitting the A key to select all, and we'll see that the red arrow here, that's the x-axis. Remember, you can always peek up here if you can't remember. Red is x. So I want to scale this, stretch it out a little bit in that direction. So I'm going to select all by hitting the A key, hit the S key, and then I'm just going to, oh, sorry, I forgot a step, hit the S and then X to tell it we only want to scale in the X direction. And then I'm just going to pull it a little bit, maybe something like that. That looks a little bit more like something humans could walk up, So let me go maybe right about there. Okay. And you can also go in the other direction too. You can say S and Y if you want your stairs to be a little wider, a little grander. You can have fun with that. Now I'm going to show you a snapping trick that's really useful. If you notice that my stairs come up to a landing and then they turn, they split and go off in both directions. So let's do that over here. I'm going to say Shift D to duplicate my step. I'm going to put one over here, and I'm going to say Shift D, and I'm going to put another one over here. So first thing I need to do is rotate these. So I'm going to select the one I want to rotate, and I'm going to say R and Z. Remember, we want to snap it to that Z so it's spinning like a top, like a record player. It's not randomly rolling around. And then if we do 90 here, oh yeah, luckily, sometimes you do -90 depending on which way you're facing, that kind of thing. But 90 worked for us perfectly, so we're good to go. So we'll grab this one. We know it's going to need to be -90. R and Z and -90 this time will bring us around facing the other direction. So these are kind of in the ballpark for what we want, but I could spend a bunch of time kind of trying to push these around and kind of eyeballing it or whatever. But now our friend the snapping can come back into play. Remember, last time we were here, we had it set to Vertex Snapping. So if you don't have that right now, go ahead and say closest vertex, make sure that move, rotate, and scale. We're just moving right now, but if you want to snap while you're rotating or scaling, that can also be useful as well. There's no reason not to have all these three on. But you can have vertex on, and we're going to go ahead and turn on. Let's go and, well, no, we'll do it with a control key. We'll leave it turned off so that it's not annoying us. But best thing you can do is kind of just get yourself kind of in the ballpark here, get them kind of close to where you want. That's close enough. What I'm going to do is use the actual G key, G to grab, which is basically what moving does. We're not doing the G key a lot because we have our little nifty move handles that we're just yanking on those colored arrows. But in this case, I do want to move right here by this corner. See where my cursor is? It's right there by that corner. I want that corner to go right there, right? Actually, as I flash the cursor, it's actually doing exactly what I wanted to do. Hold the control key down to temporarily invoke the snapping, and you can see it goes right to that corner. Perfect. Click. You're happy. I'll do it again. I'm going to grab this one. I'm going to put my cursor. This corner wants to go right here. Let me center a little bit more. This corner wants to go here. And so I'm going to put my cursor on the one I want to move. This one. I want to move this one down to here. And I'm going to hit the G key for grab. And then I'm going to hold the control key down, and I'm going to come down and touch that corner. Say I could touch that corner, or I could touch that corner, or I could put it over there. Like whatever vertice, whatever corner I'm snapping to while I hold that control key down, it snaps it right there. So perfect. So now we have our double staircase. And I can come in here and add the landing by editing this. I'm going to select the bottom one, hit the tab key to get into edit mode. I'm going to hit the 3 key to get into the edge mode. And I'm going to select this face. And then you can actually just pull this face forward. You don't even need to extrude. And then it's like, well, how do I line it up? Same way. I'm going to hold the control key down and snap right to that edge. Boom. And now I have that landing perfectly lined up with this edge over here. Maybe we want to drop the well, maybe you want to leave them open, or if you want to come up over here and say, all right, I'm going to grab this face and I'm going to extrude that down and I'm going to snap to that corner. You could do that, or maybe you want it to be, want there to be a way to get underneath the stairs. Again, it's totally up to you. You can do that. Maybe you want a landing over here. I can grab these two faces with the shift key, and I can just either move them, or I can hit the E to extrude and, give myself a little bit more geometry that way. And when you're happy with your staircase, then place it in your scene. I'm going to hit the question mark / here to go back to my staircases, and there you go. So the last thing I want to do is jump back into the camera view. I'm going to hit my 0 key to get back into my camera view, and I'm going to show you how I get the render settings once you like your scene and you're ready to render it out and send it to some other tool. If I go into the rendered view over here right now, I've already got it kind of set up in a nice way. I'm using cycles. Jumping over here into Eevee, it looks really dark. It's kind of hard to see. I mean, this would work, but I think there's some other ways that you can do this more quickly, and I want to show you how to use the Workbench setting. So there's kind of, everyone thinks this is, oh yeah, there's 2 different rendering engines inside of Blender. There's Eevee and Cycles, right? Cycles for when you want more ray trace stuff, when you want it to be more accurate, but when you do that, you also need, a little bit more rendering time, maybe a slightly more powerful computer. But even then, it's kind of dark and murky unless you add a background. Like we could come over here into the world properties. I'll show you how I had the sky background that's in my render. So instead of the color right here, it's just the sort of default gray background. I'm going to click this yellow dot, and I'm just going to simply add sky texture in there. And that's just going to kind of brighten up the scene nicely, because that's a really default. It's kind of like an HDRI, but it's a very simple, very light on computation and rendering time. But it gives you have some controls over here. You can change the color, the look, whatever. But the default sky here is just kind of, sort of bluish gray sky. But it also brightens up your scene considerably by adding some sky texture to the background of your object. But even then, it does take a lot more effort to you got to move your lights around. You got to really kind of work on the surfaces. So a shortcut to that, it's like, yeah, that's great. I'll learn that someday. But what I want right now is something I can start painting over that I don't have to squint at. So what I recommend that you should do is come over here to the little back of the camera, find that render tab there. And instead of Cycles or Eevee, go to the middle one here, Workbench. Workbench is kind of useful for a lot of stuff. You see, I already have it set up in the way that I exported the render. That's really nice. You can get this kind of very simple lighting. I've switched over to a matte cap over here. It's on Studio by default, but if you switch over to a matte cap, I really like this one over here. This is kind of this, I don't know, it's a Studio Light. There you go. Studio Light, Clay, Studio, whatever. This sort of default one is fine too. Like a lot of these are kind of like straightforward. That'll give you kind of different, you can do this like more like metallic surface if you want it to be a little bit more, shiny, whatever. But I typically tend to like this like Studio Light one right in the middle here. It's really kind of clean and crisp. And then you scroll down over here. I recommend you turn on your shadows if you want, or you can turn them off. You don't have to, but if you want that shadow, we put the sun here to cast this little ray of light into the scene. If you want those shadows drawn for you, you can have them turned on. If you don't, you want to put your own shadows in later, you can leave that turned off. That's up to you. Cavity just makes it a little easier to see the edges. It's kind of like a little ambient occlusion pass there. So you look at the difference on the steps. Like with the cavity turned off, it's really hard to see those steps. Turn on the cavity and like, ooh, every step is really clearly drawn. Same thing with that outline. The outline just kind of gives you a little bit of a slight black line around everything. And if you want much heavier lines, yeah, down over here is freestyle. So it's kind of confusing because it's like freestyle SVG export. That might be a add-on that I have turned on. You may not see that there. I'm going to come down and check this freestyle and pop this one open, and you can see that there is a line thickness controller. So if I hit F12, oh, it's on the other screen. By default, it's going to give that very heavy cartoony line over everything. And if you don't like that, I'll close that. You can say, like, well, what if we do like 0.5? We'll do it half as strong. And I'll hit F12 to render that again. You can see how the lines are a little more subtle. But this can really help. It gives you that kind of like, comic book outline, storyboarding, whatever. It's really kind of easy to see these lines and edges. And you can see how a render like this would be so much easier to paint over in Photoshop or whatever than one where it's really dark and murky. You still get the shape of your shadows. You still get the shape of the puddles of light or whatever. You kind of have your cake and eat it too again. So I really recommend this Workbench setting. And then if you haven't seen, actually I've been doing it, but I haven't really been talking about it. You come up over here to render and select render image, or just type in F12 if you have an F12 button easily at hand. Either one of those will work. And then you'll render out the little scene. If you're happy with what you see in the scene, remember, you can always go back and move your camera and move your lights and do whatever you want. But it's like, this is good. I want this out of Blender. How do I get it into Photoshop? Well, you need to come up over here to Image, to this little drop down over here. Pop that open and then just save it. Save as, save a copy, whatever. Any one of these will work. And you're just going to export that out. Put it wherever you want to find it, give it a name you're going to recognize, and then open up JPEG, PNG, whatever it is that you save it as in your image editor, and go to town. So have some fun with making some stairs and making some arrays, and you'll get the hang of making some extra details for your blockouts. It doesn't just have to be these kind of like cardboard slab walls that we've got going on. You can add just a little bit more detail with a few simple tools. Things like these little handrails. That's just a default cube shrunk down, extruded, extruded, extruded in a duplicate array. Done, right? Very simple to do that. So those are kind of the things that you can do as an absolute beginner to create a paint over block out in Blender.